So now we're going to start the body of the hat, which means we're going to knit in garter stitch, which is knitting every single row. If you're going to make the baby size, you'll knit until your hat measures 11 centimeters from the cast on. If you're knitting the child size, you'll knit until your hat measures 14 centimeters from the cast on. And if you're knitting the adult size like me, you'll knit until your hat measures 16 centimeters from the cast on. But if you want to make a longer hat for whatever reason, you want to make a slouchy style or an extra long hat, or you want to fit a lot of hair in there or something like that, you can knit your hat even longer. Knit it to whatever length you like before you start the crown decreases. So before we start knitting that garter stitch, we need to change to our bigger needles. That's nice and easy. So we turn our work to start, and I've got my brim stitches still on my smaller needle, and I'm taking one of my bigger needles here, and I'm going to start knitting. And I'm just going to knit every single stitch. In the brim, we were knitting and purling. For the body of the hat, we just knit everything. So there's no purl stitches, just knits. And I'm knitting onto this big needle. Just keep knitting, shuffle my stitches up to the end of my left-hand needle so they're easier to access and I'm not stretching my work. And you probably won't start to see the knit fabric develop until you've done 2 rows at least, or the garter stitch fabric. Usually takes a couple of rows before you can see your patterns develop. This first row of all knits, when you're knitting onto your bigger needle, can be a little bit slow because you're using a much larger needle to get into these much smaller stitches. So just give yourself a little bit of extra patience. But the next row should be much easier. And there we are with our last stitch. Now I'm going to get rid of my smaller needles. I'm going to put them aside so I don't accidentally knit with them and pick up my other large needle. Now I'm knitting everything on the larger needle size. I don't want to accidentally knit with one large needle and one small needle, so I've put those smaller ones aside. And now I knit my next row, all knit stitches, no purls. We're going to start seeing that knit fabric developing here. We can already start seeing it appear. Look, just there, we can start seeing it. So we're going to keep going. We've got a little bit of knitting to do before we get to our 16 centimeters or the size that you need for your pattern size that you're making. Once we do our third and fourth row, you should really be able to start seeing your garter stitch fabric developing. And it's a really noticeable difference between the garter stitch and the ribbing. We're just about to the end of our second row. There we go. We can really see that first ridge of garter stitch. Let's get another row going. And it's the fabric's starting to relax a bit more now. Because we've moved on to these larger needles from the smaller needles, the fabric will be a little looser, which is what we're aiming for. Tighter brim and a more relaxed body of the hat. Are you finding this section a bit more relaxing because you don't have to think about bringing your yarn to the front and the back and two different stitches? It's just knit, 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 knit all the way. We might do one more row so you can see what it looks like. A little funny thing happened there, but it's all fixed. Last stitch of this row. Let's see what it's starting to look like. Yep, I can definitely see that garter stitch happening. Same on this side, looking good. Let's do one more row together. Really starting to show up now. You can see that there. I've got two ridges of garter stitch now. When you're counting rows in garter stitch, it's a little bit different than counting rows in stocking stitch or ribbing because each ridge of garter stitch equals 2 rows. So if we have a look here, this is the section that I've already knit here. I've got 1, 2 ridges. That means I've got 4 rows. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 individual rows, but I've got 2 ridges. And sometimes the pattern will refer to ridges in garter stitch rather than individual rows. So it might say knit 12 ridges of garter stitch. And essentially you've knit 24 rows to achieve those 12 ridges. Just a little bit of knitting trivia for you. Might help you in a future pattern. I really love garter stitch because it's so nice and squishy and warm. It's a really lovely thick fabric, but it's not heavy. I use garter stitch in a lot of my patterns. I think it's really beautiful. And we're just about to the end of this fourth row. And let's have a look there. We've got some really nice garter stitch fabric happening there on both sides. So I'm going to continue on knitting my garter stitch, and I'll let you continue knitting your garter stitch, and I'll come back and meet you here when I've knit to 16 centimeters. I'll see you soon.